You're standing on the deck of the most advanced warship your nation has ever built. Steel hull, steam-powered, armed with cannons that can punch through fortress walls. You've already won this war once before. Today, it's just a formality, a victory lap. Then your ship stops moving, not slowing down, just stops, dead in the water. You hear something scraping below, metal grinding against wood, and then the world explodes. Within 60 seconds, half your crew is dead. Within 5 minutes, you're bleeding from multiple wounds, collapsing on a deck painted red. The water around you is draining away, and you realize with absolute horror that you're not going anywhere. You're stuck, helpless, a sitting duck. This isn't fiction. This is exactly what happened to Admiral James Hope and the British Royal Navy on a muddy river in China on June 1859. And the man who engineered this nightmare didn't use better weapons. He used better thinking. Let's talk about the day Britain learned that sometimes the deadliest trap is the one you never see coming. Main content. The date is June 25th, 1859. Location, the mouth of the Peiho River in China. A British steam gunboat called HMS Plover is charging forward through murky brown water, heading straight for what looks like a simple wooden barrier stretched across the channel. Admiral Hope isn't worried. They blasted through the first obstacle hours ago. Easy work. The Chinese fort sitting on both banks look quiet, almost empty, like nobody's even home. Hope probably feels pretty good right about now. Why wouldn't he? His ship represents the cutting edge of naval technology. Iron plating, modern artillery, steam power. The Chinese, they're still using outdated smoothbore cannons and wooden junks. This isn't even a fair fight. And then everything goes wrong. The Plover slams into something solid beneath the surface. Not a sandbar, something deliberate, something engineered. Massive tree trunks lashed together with iron chains anchored deep, positioned just below the waterline where nobody could see them. The ship lurches violently, the engine screams. The propeller spins uselessly, churning mud and foam. They're stuck. And that's when the forts wake up. Gun ports that looked abandoned suddenly fly open. 60 Chinese cannons, all pre-aimed, all waiting for exactly this moment, open fire at point-blank range. It's not scattered fire. It's precise, coordinated, devastating. The first shell kills the bow gunner instantly, just vaporizes him. Admiral Hope takes a round through his thigh. Before he can even process the pain, another bullet tears through his arm. He goes down hard. Around him, sailors are being cut to pieces, screaming, dying. There's nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. The ship can't move. Within minutes, 40 crew members are reduced to 9. 9 men still standing. Everyone else is dead or bleeding out. Behind the Plover, 4 more British gunboats hit the same trap. Same result. Stuck, helpless, being systematically torn apart by Chinese artillery that's had weeks to calibrate their range and elevation for exactly these positions. And here's the worst part. The tide is going out. As the water level drops, these advanced warships of the Royal Navy, pride of the British Empire, settle deeper into thick mud. They can't move, can't escape, or can't even aim their guns properly. They're just targets now, and the Chinese batteries keep firing, calmly, methodically, blowing them to pieces. This is the Battle of Taku Forts, and the man responsible for this massacre, a Mongol general who understood one simple truth. You don't need better weapons to win. You need a better plan. Now, let's rewind and understand how we got here. The Second Opium War kicked off in 1856. Britain and France were furious that China refused to accept their forced opium trade and had mistreated some of their nationals. So they did what empires do. They sent warships and soldiers to persuade the Qing dynasty to sign humiliating treaties that would open Chinese ports, legalize opium imports, and let foreign diplomats walk straight into Beijing. By May 1858, as British and French forces had already captured the Taku forts once, easily. They forced China to sign the Treaty of Tianjin, which gave European powers basically everything they wanted: massive financial compensation, access to more ports, legal opium distribution, the whole package. The forts were dismantled and handed back to Chinese control. British commanders assumed the war was over. China had been beaten. Case closed. But the Xianfeng Emperor had other ideas. Immediately after signing that treaty in June 1858, he appointed a man named Zheng Rinchen to take charge of coastal defense. And this is where things get interesting. Zheng Rinchen wasn't just some palace bureaucrat. He was a Mongol prince, the 26th generation descendant of Khazar, who happened to be Genghis Khan's brother. War strategy was literally in his blood. Zheng Rinchen looked at the situation clearly. Chinese cannons couldn't match British naval guns in a straight fight. Chinese infantry didn't have the training or modern rifles to beat European soldiers in conventional battles. The technology gap was real, undeniable. But here's the thing. Zheng Rinchen didn't care about matching British firepower. He cared about destroying British ships, and he realized he didn't need better cannons to do that. He needed better preparation. So he got to work. And what he built over the next year was nothing short of brilliant. First, he rebuilt and massively reinforced the Taku forts. Not just repairs, complete upgrades, more artillery batteries, better positions, and crucially, he trained his gunners for accuracy over volume. Precision shots, measured fire, not wild barrages. In front of the fort walls, he ordered construction of 2 rows of deep defensive ditches filled with water and thick mud. Anyone trying to cross on foot would slow to a crawl. Behind those ditches, fields of sharpened bamboo stakes and iron spikes. Anyone who made it through the mud would get impaled. He brought in 4,000 Mongol cavalry from Chahar and Suiwan as mobile reserves, fast, deadly, ready to strike wherever the defenses weakened. But his masterpiece, the thing that would turn this battle into a legend, was what he did to the river itself. Zheng Rinchen ordered construction of 3 barrier lines across the Peiho River channel, 3 layers of invisible death. The first barrier was made of vertical iron stakes, each one topped with a sharp spike, supported by tripod bases at the river bottom, positioned perfectly to pierce ship hulls when the tide was high. The second barrier was the killing blow. Full-size tree trunks connected with heavy iron chains and thick rope cables. Immovable, unbreakable, strong enough to stop a steam-powered warship dead in its tracks. The third barrier was linked wooden casks and bulk materials, a backup trap in case anything got through the first 2. And here's the genius part. All 3 barriers were positioned just below the high tide waterline. Invisible, undetectable. When British scouts examined the river mouth through telescopes, they saw open water. Nothing suspicious, no obstacles. It looked completely clear. The barriers would only become visible, only become relevant when ships were already committed to the channel, moving at full speed, unable to reverse course quickly. By the time you realized you'd sailed into a trap, it was already too late. In June 1859, British envoy Frederick Bruce and a French diplomat arrived at the Peiho River mouth with a naval squadron commanded by Admiral James Hope. Their mission was simple: sail upriver to Beijing and get the treaty ratified. Standard diplomatic procedure. They had gunboats and troops as escort, nothing to worry about. Chinese officials met them with a suggestion: don't use the river, land up the coast at Beitang, and travel overland to Beijing. Safer, easier. The British refused. They saw this as weakness, an insult to protocol. They'd sailed this river before. They'd captured these forts before. What did they have to fear? Admiral Hope commanded 11 shallow draft steam gunboats carrying 48 guns and 500 men. Larger vessels waited offshore with another 600 Marines and sailors ready for landing operations. It was overwhelming force. Nobody expected trouble. On the night of June 24th, British sappers rowed upriver under cover of darkness. They found the first barrier of iron stakes and blew it apart with explosives. Easy, just like they thought. The next afternoon, HMS Opossum led 4 gunboats through the gap at full steam, heading straight for the second barrier. They had no idea it was there, no clue what was waiting. Only when Opossum, followed by Plover, Lee, and Haughty, smashed into the second boom, did the trap spring shut. 30 to 40 Chinese cannons erupted simultaneously, not random fire, coordinated, pre-aimed. Every gun already knew exactly where the ships would be, because Senge Rinchen had engineered it that way. The ships couldn't maneuver, couldn't retreat, couldn't advance. They were pinned against an immovable barrier, taking fire from multiple angles. Within minutes, all 4 gunboats were wrecked. Admiral Hope went down with 2 wounds. His ship was shredded. Only 9 crew members were still alive and standing. The remaining 7 gunboats tried to provide covering fire from behind, but 6 of them got disabled in the process. By 6 p.m., with the tide draining fast and 4 gunboats grounded within easy range of Chinese artillery, British commanders faced total disaster. They made a desperate decision: launch ground assaults, get men ashore, and take those forts by force. Marines and sailors jumped into the water, wading toward shore through deep mud under murderous fire from Chinese rifles, muskets, and artillery. They struggled through knee-deep muck, got caught on defensive stakes, fell into hidden ditches, got shot down in huge numbers. Only 50 troops reached the outer fort wall before the entire assault collapsed. It was hopeless, suicidal. They had to retreat, leaving wounded men scattered across the mudflats. Some of those wounded stayed in the freezing water until 1 in the morning, waiting for rescue that barely came. Final casualty count? 91 British dead. 355 wounded. Chinese casualties were minimal. An American missionary named Samuel Wells Williams, who witnessed the aftermath, wrote that this was possibly the worst British defeat since the 1842 retreat from Kabul. One survivor said he'd rather go through the 1854 charge of the Light Brigade, that infamous suicidal cavalry charge into Russian guns, just 3 times in a row rather than experience what Senge Rinchen did to them at Taku. The defeat forced Britain to completely rethink their strategy. They had to assemble a massive expeditionary force of 18,000 troops, which delayed their offensive by 13 months and extended the war another full year. When Anglo-French forces finally returned in 1860 with overwhelming numbers, they didn't even try the river. They bypassed it entirely, landed at Beitang, and attacked the forts from land. But here's what matters. Senge Rinchen proved something that empires hate to admit. Technological superiority doesn't guarantee victory, not when you're facing someone who understands the battlefield better than you do. By engineering the river itself, turning it into an invisible obstacle course, exploiting tidal physics, and preparing overlapping fields of fire, Senge Rinchen transformed British advantages into fatal weaknesses. He didn't outgun them, he outthought them. Closing. So what's the lesson here? Sometimes the most devastating weapon isn't the biggest gun or the thickest armor. It's not the fastest ship or the newest technology. Sometimes the deadliest weapon is knowing exactly where your enemy will be when the tide goes out. Senge Rinchen didn't win because he had better resources. He won because he understood something fundamental about warfare. The battlefield isn't neutral ground. It's a tool, and if you shape it correctly, if you prepare it properly, you can turn your enemy's strengths into their downfall. Admiral Hope sailed into that river confident, prepared for a fight, sure, but confident. He had superior technology, superior firepower, superior ships. He'd won this battle before. What could possibly go wrong? Everything. Everything went wrong because he was fighting on a battlefield designed specifically to kill him. Every barrier positioned exactly where it needed to be. Every cannon pre-aimed at the exact spots where ships would get stuck. Every defensive ditch dug to slow down infantry assaults. It wasn't luck. It was engineering, preparation, strategy. And that's what makes this story so powerful. It's not about Chinese forces being stronger than British forces. They weren't. It's about one brilliant commander recognizing his limitations and building a solution that turned those limitations into advantages. You can't outshoot them? Fine. Make sure they can't shoot back effectively. You can't match their technology? Fine. Make their technology irrelevant. You can't beat them in open combat? Fine. Don't fight them in open combat. Choose your ground. Shape your ground. Control your ground. That's the difference between tactics and strategy. Tactics are how you fight. Strategy is where you fight, when you fight, and whether you fight at all. Senge Rinchen chose the where, the when, and the how. And by the time Admiral Hope realized what was happening, the battle was already over. He just didn't know it yet. History loves to focus on technological advancement, better weapons, faster ships, stronger armor, and those things matter. They absolutely do. But they're not everything. They're not even the most important thing. The most important thing is understanding the fight you're actually in, not the fight you want to be in. Britain wanted a naval engagement. Senge Rinchen gave them a demolition derby and a drainage ditch. Britain wanted to showcase their superior technology. Senge Rinchen turned that technology into expensive coffins. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Let me know you're out there. Subscribe if you want more deep dives into the battles that textbooks barely mention. The moments where everything changed because one person thought differently. And drop a comment. Tell me what historical trap, ambush, or upset victory you want to hear about next. Because here's the truth. History isn't just a list of dates and names. It's a collection of moments where someone looked at impossible odds and found a way, where innovation beat imitation, where preparation beat power, where a Mongol prince with wooden barriers and iron chains defeated the greatest navy on earth. And that That's a story worth remembering.